Let me tell you a story. When I first started, there were only a select few races represented in Hearthstone, aside from the main bunch from the Alliance and the Horde. Well, since then, we've seen all sorts of new chaps that people have never seen before. Jinyu, Vermin, hell, even Gorin. But most notable to me is what may be my favourite race of them all. They're proud, but they're afraid. They're noble, but they're down on their luck. They're cursed, and their future is grim. They are the Arakkoa of Draenor. First seen by the people of Azeroth on Outland, through the dark portal in the Blasted Lands, the Arakkoa were a people on the verge of extinction. Their culture was dead on a world that was already clutching onto life by the tips of its fingers. Their people were few, and those that lived were crippled, hiding in their crouched forms under ragged cloaks. They offered no answers and asked no questions, and even those few were divided. But of course, their story doesn't start at this time. Not on Outland. Turn the clock back to many, many years ago. The Dark Portal has not been built, the Orcish Horde has not been developed, and the Warlock Gul'dan is yet to curse the Orcs with their green skin. Draenor is free, the Draenei people live in peace, and the planet is whole. And the Arakkoa Empire is still divided. In the land of Arak, a dense dark forest topped by enormous rock formations, the tall-standing, proud Arakkoa rule from atop the spires of Arak. For hundreds of years, the children of the sun god, Rukmar, worshipped their mother god, believing the sun itself to be their birthright, and the sky to be their meat and drink. What are they without the sky? They were the successor to the ancient Apexis culture. The structures were beautiful. The technology was a marvel. The royal line of the Talon King was beloved by everyone, and everyone was dear to the Talon King. The whole world was open to the Arakkoa, but they shied too far from the shadow and flew too close to the sun. Terok, the Talon King, hero of the Arakkoa and beloved father, was betrayed by his sages. His mighty wings were torn off his body. He and his daughter were cast down into the swamp called Sethek Hollow, where the god Seth's body rotted. From that day on, the adherents of Rukmar, the priesthood, led the Arakkoa, not the royalty.
The cursed blood seared his flesh and tore at his spine. As he withered, Terok had but one concern: his daughter living. Seeing her broken body, Terok despaired. He surrendered to the creeping darkness. But in that darkness, something found him. A strange power filled the Talon King. A presence urged him on.
Terok became cursed. A madness gripped his body, alongside all others cast down with him that survived the fall. His body became crippled and weak. His mind became clouded with darkness. His daughter was dead. He was broken. Terok was aimless and, like all the others, turned away from the light that had burned him. But in the shadows, he found something. He found Anzu.
The Raven God, Anzu, gifted Terok and his gods with dark powers. In time, they would be known as Talon Priests.
Protecting them from madness, though not from despair. Only time could heal the misery. As a people, the Arakkoa outcasts realized they were cursed, but they were determined not to be broken.
This curse has not broken me yet.
But they knew they couldn't live in the sunlight up in the spires, where they were hated and feared by the people, and reviled by the priesthood. So Terok and his Talon priests built Sketis, a small city in the shadow of the mountains, to live in peace. Across the dark forest, hidden in the shadows of the trees, the Arakkoa outcasts built their small towns called Vales, and practiced dark magic that Anzu had granted them. They communicated in secret, keeping to the shadows. They would exchange the mantra, "Shadows gather," one would say. The response, "When the raven swallows the day." They fought with the curse that chewed at their minds, and though many lost the fight, the Arakkoa outcasts had found a way to live. Terok, however, had not. He grew feverish, obsessed with delving into the shadow to find a cure for the curse, though there was none to be found. He became unreasonable, deranged, and the Talon priests that worked with him resolved to seal him away in the shadow world. The Raven Anzu offered no help, because even he was cursed. He disappeared, unable to keep the curse of the dead god under control. The outcasts were left entirely alone. Up above in the spires, Rukmar worship became more and more sycophantic. The great religious empire was led by fear. To speak out against the Arakkoa or their god Rukmar, or even express a different opinion, was to be declared a heretic, an outcast, and to be cast out was to never return. A heretic's wings were torn from their body, ripped to shreds by long knives. Their body was tossed off the great spires and into Sethek Hollow to languish with the other outcasts. There they were expected to die, or to live without flight, which is worse than death. You see, the High Arakkoa believed that shying away from the sun's light meant you were infected with this curse, a disease that kept Rukmar's light from them. They thought that being near the outcasts would infect them. Going near the exiles was forbidden on pain of, well, exile. Only the priesthood in charge knew the truth. As more heretics fell down, the culture became more obsessed. Chicks were raised in pairs. If one misbehaved, both were punished. If one performed well, both were praised. Chicks were encouraged to keep an eye on their partners in case of heresy. And if they were thought heretics, well, it's a long way down. For generations this continued until the earliest days of the Horde, 35 years ago, when the Arakkoa leadership had obsessively dug out the remains of ancient Arakkoa cultures, rooting out a gigantic solar-powered weapon that they mounted atop the highest peak of Skyreach. With this, they said, we can destroy the outcasts and their curse forever. At the peak of day, with the wave of a hand, the great crystals would focus the sun's light, and a massive beam would sweep across the forest and completely destroy whatever it was aimed at, which inevitably was the homes of the outcasts. The outcasts could no longer live in the safety of their woods. In droves, they made a decision. They would no longer try to live here in Arak. They would leave, a great exodus, carrying only what they could fit on their backs. They would hide in the shadows, fleeing to the forest of Talador, until things blew over, until things got better. In secret, the Talon priests tried to summon their king back. They tried to find Anzu. They tried to find something, anything that could help them. They delved deeper and deeper into the shadows, desperate to flee from the burning sun. In a better time, this story would end in open rebellion. Aided by their allies from the Alliance and the Horde, the storyteller Reshad and the leader of the Talon priests, Shadow Sage Iskar, would defeat the curse. They would return Anzu and his mate to their aid, and reunite the broken sects of the outcasts. In a better time, Reshad and his bird Percy pieced the missing story together. Iskar summons Terok's power, and the outcasts lead a charge to Skyreach on the backs of Anzu's raven children. In a better timeline, the adherents of Rukmar are defeated, and Arakkoa culture is united again. In a better timeline, the Arakkoa won. But as we all know, times change. The Orcish Horde was built by the warlock Gul'dan, and by his ministrations Draenor was almost completely destroyed. The higher Arakkoa of Skyreach found themselves overpowered when the full might of the Horde swept across the land, destroying and pillaging and conquering. The elements of the world were broken, the planet cracked and broke apart. Upon the opening of countless portals to summon countless demons, the tanet was exploded entirely, leaving it only a husk of its former self. And Arak was utterly destroyed, its remains collapsing into the emptiness of space. Reshad, Iskar, Skyreach, none were ever seen again. All that remained now was the outcasts that had hidden in Talador, which they renamed Terokar Forest. Once it had been red and autumnal, now it was black and lit only by its dimly glowing fruit. Perfect for hiding. In the wake of the fall of Skyreach, the heretic leader known as Ikis took command of his people. Ikis had once been an adherent, a ruler of Skyreach, But when he found out the truth about the Talon King Terok, he was cast out. Driven mad, Ikis obsessed over Terok and came to believe that he, Ikis, was the Talon King reborn. He gained followers, believers that he was the hero to save the Arakkoa from total annihilation, and in his madness he declared himself the new Talon King. Talon King Ikis led the Sethek cult down in Joachindun, the empty, cursed city of the dead built by the Draenor, to summon and enslave what remained of the god Anzu. He succeeded, cementing the Arakkoa's place as having fallen completely from grace. Talon King Ikis was heading a new plan, one that could lead his people to greatness again, and which could destroy the Burning Legion and everything else on Outland. He wanted to summon the remains of a dark power that resided on Draenor's surface long ago. Fortunately, this plan failed. Ikis was killed, but nobody replaced him. Leaderless, living in tree houses in small groups that grow smaller every day, the remaining Arakkoa are cursed. Their homes are gone, their king is dead, and for as long as they can remember, their wings have been clipped. The adherents turned away from the dark. The outcasts turned away from the light. Remember when I mentioned the mantra the outcasts would speak? Shadows gather when the raven swallows the day. Let me tell you a story. Once, this was the lullaby that the sun god Rukmar would sing to her children, the first Arakkoa. Shadows gather when the raven swallows the day. Burning sky is extinguished as black wings fold gently about the heavens. Rest, my children, rest, for even the sun must sleep. My, how they've lost their way.
Mr. Roboto, domo arigato, Mr.